Greetings and merry meet, everyone, to the Great North Pagan Podcast. It is Wednesday, April the 10th. I am Thomas LionLord Punton.
And I am Erin Lecy.
Okay, and I hope everyone's doing well out there in the internet magical land. Well, we're going to continue our parts of the common forms of divination, and in this episode we will talk about palm reading, team reading, tea leaf reading, and pendulum divination. And we have a couple of people here to help us out. We got Heather Garrett, who is well enough known, as seen in many of the rituals that we've been part of, and also with the meetup. And of course, Joy AzureStar, also that's been doing a lot of tea leaf reading.
Yep.
So we'll get started underneath right here with the palm reading. If Heather, if you could give us some enlightenment, I know you've been well enough versed in the divination.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have been palm reading since I was about 12 years old. I met a gypsy woman who read my palm when I was 12, and she blew me out of the water. So from then I started studying, reading books for many years until I could find teachers, and I later actually found that same gypsy woman to help teach me, and another woman whose name has escaped me off the top of my head right now. Her name's Kathy something. And she was trained in hand analysis. So I've had gypsy old school teaching and the new modern hand analysis. Some history on palm reading. No one is really 100% sure where palm reading began or who started it, but it started out in like India, China, places like that. And then the gypsies spread it all through Europe, and then, came over here and all that good stuff.
What drew you to palm reading? I mean, aside from a gypsy woman reading your own hand, what was it that really just resonated with you to start wanting to look for new teachings?
Well, when I was 12, it was mainly because I was just absolutely blown away with palm reading. I mean, she told me everything about myself. And this was something that I could actually study. Because when you're 12, you don't really grasp a whole lot of things to start studying things, per se, like this. But your hands are always on you, and so from there, I just started to study. Read books and all that other good stuff.
Alright, so I see a bunch of lines on my hand. Tell me what some of these lines mean. What are some of the major lines?
Okay, let's see. The major lines are the lifeline. And the lifeline tells you...
Which one is that?
The lifeline is the one that starts below your pointer finger and in between your thumb and curls around that big mound below your thumb. And that's the mound of Venus, but not everyone knows that. So, the lifeline tells you all about, the stamina of your life, how good your life is. Your goal is to want a deep line that runs without a bunch of breaks and bumps and islands and all of the other things that can happen to a lifeline. And forks. Forks aren't terrible either, but you want a nice deep line without a bunch of chaining and stuff like that. That's the goal. And then we have the mind line. Now, the mind line is usually attached to the lifeline right below the pointer finger. Usually starts around the lifeline or is completely attached to that. And then that runs across the palm to the mound of Luna, or that big mound towards the base of your hand and up towards your pinky, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And this tells you what kind of mind you have, whether you think more intuitively, whether you think more logically, or whether intellect isn't important to you at all, or whatnot. It tells you all about your intellect and how you think. Then there's the heart line, which starts below the pinky, and then that curls up either towards the middle finger or the pointer finger, and that tells you your heart. If there's a lot of chaining in there, that means that you're a very emotional person, and if there isn't, that means you're not so much an emotional person. And two, it tells you also how you see the world emotionally, or whether you don't, and things like that. And then two, all these lines too, there's also timelines associated with them, so you can tell about certain events that have happened at different times in your life.
Which hand do you normally read?
That all depends on what you study. When I first started learning from books and stuff like that, they told you to read the person's dominant hand. So if you're left-handed, you read the left hand. If you're right-handed, you read the right hand. And then I also learned from the gypsy woman who taught me, and she taught me that you always read the right hand. That the left hand is all the plans that God had laid out for you and all that, but your right hand actually tells you how you live your life. And through my own experience, I've discovered the gypsy way is way better. So that's how I read. I read mainly the right hand, but there is tons of great stuff in the left hand as well. So, I mean, you do read both hands, but from the way I read palms, I mainly read the right hand.
And from what I understand, when you did like my palm reading, that you can only ask questions about your own self. You can't ask about somebody else's without their palm, right?
Yeah, your hand tells you about you. I mean, there is intuition that plays into palm reading as well, and sometimes that's just enough of a doorway for people to be able to get information on other people. And sometimes I do, but like if I'm reading your hand and you want to know about like your brother or your sister, it's not going to really say it necessarily unless they're causing some kind of issue in your life.
Okay.
Or something really happy. Other than that, it's your hand, so it's all about you.
Because I remember, like, also when we did the desserts and divination last week, I saw, like, on your table, you have, like, a little statue in your hand that shows the guide of all that. Has there ever been a moment where you've done a palm reading that's kind of completely different off that pattern?
Oh, yeah. People have hands all the time that don't quite match up. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. It just means that they're just a little more rare than everybody else. Like, there's a line on the people's hands that can make the mind line and the heart line actually one line. That's fairly rare, but that does happen. People can have double lifelines where there's two, and that usually means either they had a near-death experience or they were adopted or just something traumatic changed their whole life path. All the lines can double for one reason or another. And then there are other lines throughout the hand that people have and some don't and things like that. Like, not everyone has a fame line. That doesn't mean they won't be successful, because that's what the line is about, success and things like that. It just, for some reason, some people have it and some people don't. It all depends.
What, it wasn't the side of your hand is where you could tell how many children you might have?
Oh, yep, and yep. There's also, your marriage lines, your love lines, and then there's the children lines. Although nowadays, it's not very accurate to read children lines anymore, since we live in the day and age of birth control. We have complete control over how many children we have, for the most part.
Or adoption, is that?
Yeah, or adoption. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because reading male and female hands is different. Men usually don't have all their children on their hand. Children lines only show up for men if they have a deep connection or a great bond between them. So they can have everyone else's children and their own, or they don't have even all of their own. It all just depends. Men work a little differently. Whereas women, it's really hard to read, because if their cat is like their baby, it'll show up on their hand with their children. And then usually women, too, they don't let go of their children, and then they have grandchildren, and then it's all mushed together. So by the time a woman is like in her 70s, there's usually about 1 million children lines, and you can't tell how many kids are actually theirs. Now, sometimes their actual children, the lines will show up a little deeper, but it's really hard to tell. Like, I've read my mom's hand. Apparently she's got like 6 kids. I wasn't aware of that. There's only 3 of us.
Maybe just factoring double, I guess.
Yeah. So it's actually extremely not accurate for the most part to tell someone how many children they're going to have, unless they don't have any and don't love pets.
And then for example, then you say that, if there's like a traumatic event, if like person had something bad happen to them where they got upset and they clenched their fists more, would stuff like that play in a factor too?
Well, they say that your hand does change on a monthly basis. Not traumatically, but it does change. And clenching and all those different things don't necessarily change it. I honestly do not know what it is that changes your hand, but it does. And I've been watching my hand since I was 12 years old. And my hand is nothing like it was when I was 12. And both your hands change for the most part, but your left hand, I've discovered, does not change a lot, whereas your right hand does.
Even if you're a lefty?
That's through my experience, yes. I read my sister's palm a lot, and she's a lefty. And I have noticed the change on her right hand more than the left. That's what was my deciding factor for which hand I read more dominantly, either the gypsy way or the hand analysis way. It was reading my sister's hand. Her left hand hardly changes, just like mine, but yet her right hand changes like mine does.
That's something.
That's why you never know who you're going to get with the way people read palms. Because some stick with the gypsy way, 100%. Others are like, no, more modern. This is what you need to read now. But you just got to feel what feels great for you. And this is what I've discovered.
So I have a question. Years ago, probably around the same time when I was 12 or 13 is when I started reading all this kind of stuff too. And there was a book that a friend of mine in school read that if you can trace a straight line from your middle finger down to the base of your hand and it crosses your lifeline, somehow that means you're going to have an early death. Is there any truth to that?
From everything that I have studied and learned, there is no way to tell if someone they're going to die by looking at their hand.
Thank you for dispelling that. Mine crosses and I'm like, great, I'm going to die before 35.
Most people do. If you draw this straight line down your pointing finger to your lifeline and you intersect your lifeline, that means you are a more adventurous person. Which I can say would probably increase your chances of dying younger if you're more adventurous.
Awesome.
But it's not going to kill you. There are marks on the hand to tell whether or not a person is going to have great illness and things like that. Like, I'm going to get hit with heart disease. I'm about 65. And I'm doing things to try and change it. Like, I've quit smoking and all that stuff, and it's slightly changed, but not a great deal. Mm-hmm. So I'm beginning to think that my heart disease is more genetic. It's not something I can really even change, because it's in both my hands. And so I'm probably going to have heart problems sometime I'm 70 on, or 65 on, and stuff like that. I can't change that. But it's also not going to kill me. Mm-hmm. I actually can live through it and have a long, long life if, I listen to the doctors and I don't smoke and I get rid of my chubby butt. But when someone is reading palms, the only way to tell if they're going to die is if they had some kind of intuitive spark that told them. Because, I'll get intuitive things all the time. I've never, ever gotten something that someone's not going to die. I've had people coming to me concerned with heart disease and cancer and stuff, wanting to know if they're going to die, and I've gotten a big no in my head. Mm-hmm. And their hand said the same as well. But I have never gotten anything that someone's going to die. And if someone is reading a palm, or someone's palm, and says, oh yes, you're going to die at this time, I would question where they learned that and how they learned that. Because from everything I've ever studied, except the very first book I ever read, there's no way to tell someone they're going to die. There's no way to say that in the hand. There's too much that could happen. Yeah.
And then we learned last week as well that there's also that for the soles of the feet as well.
Well, I'm learning how to read feet.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet. I'm still learning. I've only been studying for hardcore, maybe 6 months. I've had the book for about 2 years.
But that was just something I just discovered just in the past few weeks, because I always wondered if there was such a thing as just like with the palm of the hand that you could also read the sole of the foot too.
Yep. It kind of ties into flexorology from what I'm understanding. Mm-hmm. The different organs and different things like that are associated with different parts of your foot. And depending how puffy or crinkly or whatever the parts of the foot is, that part is affected in a different way. Yeah, everyone loves my little words when I'm explaining things to people. Your hand is puffy.
It's fluffy!
But yeah, so once I learn feet, hey, maybe come on here, we can explain the feet. I know that if you have really dry feet, it means you're going through a lot of change, though. But if you got dry feet, man, until that change is complete, don't even bother trying to put lotion on that. It ain't gonna work.
Wow, okay. I heard from a Muslim friend of mine a long time ago that looking at your hands, the lines that are most dominant are a number symbol, and that is the names, how many names there are of God. So,
really?
The line that goes, across to in between the fingers, mm-hmm. and then the ones that you normally read, mm-hmm. that is a number symbol, I think, in Arabic for how many names there are of God.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to study all the different cultures, yes, of palm reading. I mean, I have about 4 different books on 4 different cultures.
Holy moly.
And I collect palm reading books. Oh my gosh. I mean, I got the first ever published book, mind you, the 27th edition. But I'm like, this is like my baby right here. But I would love to go to India and China and those places just to study palm reading. I would love to go to the school in California and learn hand analysis. Mind you, that is so expensive, and I'd never be able to afford that. It's like $30,000.
Holy moly.
Yeah, to get certified in hand analysis. It's so expensive, but it's the only school in the United States. But I would love to just go and learn the Hindu way, and the Indian way, and the Chinese way, and I mean, you name it. Everyone has a way. I would love to just study it all. Oh, that was so much fun.
Now you went to I believe it was 3 degrees of it.
Well, not really like degrees.
Okay.
I haven't had like any like formal like school sit down. Here's your pamphlet, and once you're done, I give you a certification.
Okay.
I've been reading books and studying and looking at my own hand and all my friends' hands since I was 12. And then when I was about 22, maybe a little bit later, no, about 22, I met the gypsy woman again. And I never got formal teachings from her, but she would tell me things every time I saw her.
Okay.
And she was going to actually sit down and teach me her ways, but then she got cancer and died. We all know Raven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Raven
Yes.
Sky.
Yes. She was going to sit down and she was going to teach me formally, but that's right when she discovered she had cancer. And mind you, she also lived in Wahpeton, and it was a ways for me to go, and things just never quite worked out. But she would always tell me a little something every time I saw her. And she's the original person who read my palm when I was 12.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was her.
Wow.
It was Raven. And
Small world.
well, and yeah, she didn't remember me, but I told her, and she, ever since then, she knew my cousin at the time. So we were still kind of tied, you know. And anyway, and then after I was still kind of learning from her, there's this woman who lives near Bemidji. Her name is Kathy. I can't remember what her last name is. It's like Divanni or something. She's very does palm reading, and she's a computer designer for things, and she raises dogs. She does a lot of work out of Bridget's house in Park Rapids. No, she actually went to that school in California and did a 2-week intensive. And then she had this day intensive class that she taught at 12 Houses in Grand Forks when they were at their original place. And she taught this like day-long intensive of pretty much tried to cram those whole 2 weeks into a whole day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that is exactly what I needed. Once I took that class, everything clicked. Because I'm a hands-on learner. You can give me a book, and I can learn. But it takes that one little, like, someone showing me for it all to click, and it did. And it just clicked. And I'm like, oh my god, I got this. I finally felt comfortable enough that I could actually give accurate readings. And so then someone finally just said to me, well, then go and do readings. I'm like, no, I can't do that. And I went to 12 Houses, and she's like, okay, let's see what you got. And from then on, I've been reading ever since.
Well, the reason I was asking, because, what best advice would you give for anyone out there that's interested in doing palm readings?
Get as many books as you can until you find the book that mushes with you. Like, I have probably 20 books. And honestly, the 2 books I look at the most is Palm Reading for Beginners. That is an excellent book. It really is. It may seem all cheap and, cheesy, but it's a perfect place to start. And I found it very accurate. And then I have the Complete Book of Palm Reading. I don't know any of the authors for these. That book is intense. Oh my gosh. Those are the 2 books I use the most, even though I have tons of other books. But you have to find what works with you. And nowadays, you aren't just going to be able to walk out your door and find a palm reader. Like, to my knowledge, there's like 2 or 3 of us in town, and I have never met the other 2. And they aren't advertising that they're out there. So, and to find a teacher, oh yes, go find a teacher if you can, but you're probably just going to be able to find books. But there is wonderful websites. There is handanalysis.com. That is a great website for resources and classes if you live near California. But they have books you can download, and that's a great site. That's one I've just been recently exploring.
Well, I guess it was a very good insight about where you want to go for palm reading and all that. Well, I thank you so much, Heather. I think that gives us a good insight about all that. So now we'll move on to tea leaf reading.
Sing for the girl dressed in white. Sing for the sun. Sing for the light inside her. Promise and hope. When you do find that sunrise is creeping through dawn, then you will know. Nurturing, caring, fertile, loving us all. When you do find that sunlight is feeding your soul, then you will know the mother. Sing for the love. Woman in black, so traveled, wisdom and bones, weary with age and knowledge, lifetime she's known. When you do find in moonlight all mysteries solved, then you will know for the Crone.
So, Joy, if you could tell us the history of tea leaf reading.
All right. I had started putting some stuff together because I want to eventually be able to do a class. So I did some research on the art of and the history of tea leaf reading. And tea leaf reading is referred to as tasseomancy. And tea leaf reading is a form of divination that is strongly associated with the gypsies in the English. Of various forms of divination it is thought to be that tea leaf reading is the most intuitive. The history of tasso, and forgive me if I mispronounce it, tasseomancy, can be traced back hundreds of years. During tea leaf reading, the clients would drink the cup of tea, and then small amounts of the tea leaves were left in the bottom of the cup. The cup is then like turned upside down on a saucer that has on the saucer, so that the tea leaves will, form into what you would then start to read. And tea leaf has been around for, as far as I can find out, and information, about 5,000 years. So it may be that people were reading tea leaves as far back as, from a lot of the different websites I've went to, they've said up to around 5,000. Mainly with the Chinese. There isn't too much with the gypsies. Most of the information I found is through the Chinese and the Orient over in that area. Some of the places that were well known were the gypsies who traveled throughout Europe. They read for royalty and the royal court. Same with the Chinese. The Chinese read for the royal court and, the kings and queens or the emperors over there. And they were paid paid a lot of money to do so. And some emperors and some, courts had their own specific tea leaf readers that they only read for just them, nobody else. And then we had the more common tea leaf readers, like some of the gypsy travelers that would, that's how they made their money, was by, going to a tea house and reading tea leaves for people, and then a percentage of their money, kind of like what we do today, a percentage of their money would go back to the tea house, and they still got money to live with. So a lot of interesting history. I couldn't find too much about it. I mean, tea leaf reading is one of the divination forms that is like really dying out quickly. So, and for some reason, it fascinates the heck out of me.
Well, would you go through a procedure of how you do a tea leaf reading then?
What I would do is, since we have so many different varieties of tea, I usually just take a normal black tea, and actually there's a couple different ways you could do it. You can do it a loose leaf tea, which means it's not in a tea bag, or you can actually do the tea bag one. The tea bag one is less messier. It's a little harder to read because the tea leaves are smaller. The loose leaf, depending on what types of tea you get, like the oolongs and the, I'm trying to remember which one's the other one, the black teas, those are the best to read. The other ones, like the herbal teas, those are a little bit harder because it has like pieces, they're not so much just tea leaves, they have other pieces of fruit and berries and stuff inside it, so that's a little bit harder to read. So they recommend reading like the black and the oolong teas just because of it being uniform kind of type tea leaves. And then depending how you start out is the handle of the cup is where you start out, and you clockwise around the cup, and that is the time frame at the top of the cup, and then going down the cup means how long it will be. Like one of the tea leaf readings I did, a person, she had it was like it looked like when I looked at it, it looked like a dollar bill. So I started reading it, and it went like about, if you're looking at if you have the stem of the cup in your hand and you're starting to look around, it would be like at about 10 o'clock if you were looking at a clock, 6 o'clock would be where the stem is, and then going around at 10 o'clock, and that's like about, I'd say, 3 months time out. And when I started talking to her about it, and I said, are you coming into some money? I said, do you have something happening? And she just looked at me, and her eyes got big, and she goes, I never told anybody about that, but I have a settlement that should be coming in about 3 months. And there would have been no way I would have known that except for looking at the tea leaves. And it kind of shocked me because I was like, whoa, okay, I'm on to something good. And then the rest of her cup, just as it started going down, when it goes down around to the bottom of the cup, that means kind of like your life. So you can kind of look at that too as a time frame, and it showed that early on in her life that she also had money that came into her, and it seems like she, from reading it and the intuition that I picked up, kind of like what Heather says about doing with the hands, you get sparks of intuition here and there when you're reading somebody's poem. Same way with tea leaf reading. When I started reading it, it seems like she meant whenever she needs money in her tea leaves, she would manifest it, and it showed in the cup. So really interesting with that. I had other people where guides would come through, and like one person, he really liked the guide Cocapelli, and I was doing a tea leaf reading for him, and it showed up. I mean, you could see the picture with the tea leaves of Cocapelli on the side of the cup. So I'm like, I take it you like Cocapelli, and he's like, how did you know that? And I'm like, it's right there, and I showed him, and I've been documenting tea leaf reading, the pictures and stuff, and trying to write down everything that I said about it and got from the reading. So it's been interesting as far as tea leaf reading goes. What sparked me is that the same person that Heather has spoken to, Raven Sky, we know her as, she had read I had became friends with somebody that was friends with her, and she was having kind of like little group classes, and we got together one day, and she says, how do you guys does anybody do tea leaf reading? And I'm like, none of us did, and so a lot of us did only tarot. And so she goes, well, I'm going to read everybody's tea leaves. So she read my tea leaves for me, and after that was it. I was gone. I wanted to learn as much as I could about it, and then life happened, and it got put to the back burner. And then recently I had a friend ask me if I did do tea leaf reading, and I said, well, I never really tried much. And so I read, I have it's called the Little Giant Encyclopedia Tea Leaf Reading book by Jack Sachs. Very good book. It has a lot of information. It's a little book too. It has a lot of information in it, and that's what kind of like my tea leaf reading Bible. And then I recently found the tea leaf fortune cards, and it's Oriental or Asian based, but it has a lot of good information to it, and it actually comes with a set of cards. I don't so much like the cards, but I'm sorry, I lost my total train of thought.
What you liked about the cards?
Oh, the cards, I like the meanings and stuff behind them. The pictures didn't speak to me. But the information that they have with the cards, really, really good info. Very in-depth. I mean, the book is really thin. It's not as thick as the Little Giant Encyclopedia. But out of the two of them, that's what I referenced the most with. And then I had a couple websites that I went to, and I looked at information too. There was, it's called t.co.uk, and they had a lot of good information that I started looking at and reviewing and going through that way as far as learning more about it. The length of time that I've been doing tea leaf reading has not been very long at all, but I pretty much last Samhain did a tea leaf reading intensive. I did about 12 different tea leaf readings in one evening, and yeah, it was kind of like learning how to swim.
I'd thrown you in the deep end.
Yep,
Yeah.
I was thrown in the deep end, and I came out an Olympic swimmer, I think. Yeah, a lot of people that were there that evening that had never had tea leaf readings were really shocked with the information and insight that I could pick up reading their tea leaves. The most memorable one that comes out is a gentleman that came and sat down. He's like one of the last people that I read his tea leaves for, and his cup was so smooth. There was no tea, and he had loose leaf tea that he opened up his tea bag. So there should have been tea leaves in there. There were hardly no tea leaves in that cup. I've never seen a cup like that before. I mean, I'm like, you must live a pretty drama-free, everything is smooth and divine, intervention is totally, with you, because I couldn't see much in his teacup other than that he lives a good life. And everybody else had something going on or something coming in. His was smooth. That shocked me.
I want his cup.
I know. That's what I was like. And he cracks jokes at me, and he goes, "Well, maybe next time there'll be something for you to look in my cup at." And I'm like, "Okay, anytime, man. You got some drama coming. Let me see what it is, so I can see if you actually do live a drama-free life, because I've never heard of that or seen of that. There's always been something in somebody, even in like the books that I read, I have not seen them say anything about anybody having a cup that didn't have any tea leaves hardly in it when you went to read it. So I'm like, wow, I want to know what you're doing, and I want a whole manual.
Do you look for like any specific symbols, or just what comes out?
I don't look for anything as far as symbols. When I turn the teacup over, I pretty much ask my guides to give me guidance in looking at it and showing me what I need to see and relay to that person. And, the whole white light, surround yourself, blah, that whole thing. And if you don't know, get a hold of one of us, because one of us does know how to kind of do some of that stuff. But it's just pretty much I turn the cup over, and I turn it around and look at all the sides of it, going from the top to the bottom, and then just take a minute and calm myself. And then that's when the images and sometimes words come out, and it's all intuitive, is from what I can guess. I mean, my intuition really comes out reading the tea leaf. It's really interesting.
It's like what kind of just stands out.
Mm-hmm. It's not. Yeah, it's not like tarot cards, where tarot cards, have specific meanings and specific settings. Tea leaf reading is more, you have to use your intuition a lot more than the tarot cards, because the tarot cards do have their specific, in this setting it means this, and this card in this setting could mean something different from another setting. Tea leaf reading is all intuition, of what you're picking up from that person's vibrations and what is going on in their life at that time. And it can go up to, as far as I read, up to like a year. I usually don't go any further than that, because things change so much in a year even.
So it's kind of like cloud reading and things like that.
Yeah.
Finding the imagery there to read.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Is there, other than like the source you give, like, is there any other major advice you'd give for anyone that goes into tea leaf reading then?
I would say find as many different, websites. There's quite a few different websites out there that are really good, especially the ones from the UK. They actually have a school over there specifically for tea leaf reading, and like the hand analysis school, big bucks to go do it. But from what I understand, it's well worth the money. But if you got it, you can do it. If you don't, books are a really good thing. And if you have other, just practice, that old saying. I know I sound redundant on that one, but practice. I mean,
have lots of friends that like tea.
Yeah. And with the tea, I have been reading also that you can do it with coffee grounds.
I've heard that too.
And
That's my kind of reading right there.
I was like, okay, I gotta, I have a lot of friends that don't like tea, and what was recommended is that the person drink the full cup of tea. But what I do is have them take a couple of sips so they get their energy in the tea, and then I would pour out most of the water. You pour out until like just like a eighth of an inch at the bottom, just so the bottom of the saucer, the cup, is covered with water in the tea, and then that's when you turn it over in your saucer. But I would have them drink down, a couple, 3 drinks at the, if they really do not like D. Then after that, or if you're using the loose leaf. If you're using the bags, it's a little bit easier because you can just pour out as much water as you need and then open up the tea bag and sprinkle it in there and then have them swirl it around and then tip the teacup over. And there's also, I haven't gotten into this yet either because I'm trying to just get the cup down first, but you can also look at the saucer and read the saucer too, kind of like the hand. So I'm still very much in the learning stage of this.
Years ago, somebody gave me this special cup and saucer with all these different symbols on them and all kinds of stuff. It was for tea reading. And, I was like 13 when someone gave it to me. I still have it. I've broken it many times and it's glued back together. But it has all these different symbology that you find in palm reading and tarot and all that. Have you seen those cups?
Yes, I've seen those cups.
Do you know what the different symbols and things mean?
There is like a little, there's a little package, and I've seen it at Barnes & Noble. All hail Barnes & Noble.
Yes. I worship there every other day.
Right, me too. Mm-hmm. And I've seen the cup that kind of like what you're talking about, and it comes in a kit, and it has a book that explains all the symbolism.
Yeah, I got the book too. I just never read it.
Yeah, I've seen them once, but I haven't seen them back now, so I'm waiting for them to come back so that I can get one. The best thing that they say for a cup is that it's got a flatter bottom to read and that it's clear, it's white.
Yeah, my cup, it's white with all the different symbols and stuff all in red. And many cracks. And, I've dropped
It's well loved.
Well, I've never actually used it, I just keep dropping it.
Still well loved.
It's still showing love still.
I've never gotten rid of it.
There you go.
I should bring that over sometime and let you
look at it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be neat. I would love to get a couple of the cups that I've seen that they used to do like old tea leaf reading in, and that's some of the ones that you're talking about. They're like the fine china with the symbols on the inside that they had been used, and some of them are like stained so you could tell that they had been used. That would be my big purchase if I ever did something like that, because that is a big purchase. I've seen them like on different sites for at least a couple $100, but that would be one of my things that I would like to have someday when I win the lottery.
Any teas you don't recommend to use?
Just like the herbal teas, like the flavored herbal teas, because of this simple fact that they, especially the loose leaf, they have like the fruit and stuff in there, and it's just harder to read. The regular, like the black, the oolong, are the best ones to read because they're mainly just tea leaves. And get a good grade of tea leaf, like they have some really good tea companies out there that sell tea leaf, like Stash Tea, Republic of Tea, Teavana. Those are really good ones if you want to do the loose leaf tea. As far as tea bags go, Lipton, they have the triangle one. Oh my God, that just reminded me. Depending on what your element is, you can get a tea bag that goes with that element. And I'm sorry guys, I'm still learning a lot of this information. There was a lady on YouTube that I had watched, and she did tea leaf reading with the triangle tea bags, and then how to rip it open. I mean, it was pretty in depth. I was like going, wow. And trying to take notes and pause, and yeah, it was fun. And then she did one with the round tea bags, and then one with the traditional square tea bags. And she had a lot of information behind what the meanings and everything were. And maybe later on down the road when I get all of my information together, because I eventually want to get together everything so that I can do a class on teaching how to read tea leaf. So that's what I'm in the process of doing right now. And I'm going to have all my information in there. There's like 5 other things that I'm looking at, like that website with the woman that was talking about the different types of tea bags. I'm going to have that information in there and some other stuff too. So, not sure when I'll have everything together, but it's coming together.
Well, that's some very good insight on that. So
if you guys do want a tea leaf reading, give me a call or, Facebook me. It's not hard to find me on Facebook.
I want one.
well,
Yes, I do owe you one, so...
We'll try to keep all the information in the description here. So
all right.
We're going to take a little break. You'll hear some wonderful music, and we shall be right back, and we'll be talking about the pendulum. So don't go away.
The mother's heart reverberates in the ground beneath your feet, and the drummer's hands, they translate into a pounding beat, and the pounding fuels the dancers as they twist and leap and twirl, and the dancers feed the chanters as their melodies they spin, and all will feed the fire, flames leap to kiss the night, and all of this together is the goddess brought to life. Drummers drumming in the night, feel the beat, bodies ride by firelight, bathed in heat, a web of melody does sound both high and sweet. Heed the goddess when she calls the children one and all, celebrate the fire round, dance, drum and sing till the earth does pound, dance, drum and sing till the earth does pound, dance, drum and sing till the earth does pound. The mother's heart reverberates in the ground beneath your feet, and the drummer's hands, they translate into a pounding beat, and the pounding fuels the dancers as they twist and leap and twirl, and the dancers feed the chanters as their melodies they spin, and all will feed the fire, flames leap to kiss the night, and all of this together is the goddess brought to life. Drummers drumming in the night, feel the beat, bodies ride by firelight, bathed in heat, a web of melody does sound both high and sweet. Heed the goddess when she calls the children one and all, celebrate the fire round, dance, drum and sing till the earth does pound, dance, drum and sing till the earth does pound, dance, drum and sing till the earth does pound. The mother's heart reverberates in the ground beneath your feet, and the drummer's hands, they translate into a pounding beat, and the pounding fuels the dancers as they twist and leap and twirl, and the dancers feed the chanters as their melodies they spin, and all will feed the fire, flames leap to kiss the night, and all of this together is the goddess brought to life. Drummers drumming in the night, feel the beat, bodies ride by firelight, bathed in heat, a web of melody does sound both high and sweet. Heed the goddess when she calls the children one and all, celebrate the fire round, dance, drum and sing till the earth does pound, dance, drum and sing till the earth does pound, dance, drum and sing till the earth does pound. The mother's heart.
And we are back. Thanks so much for listening to that musical interlude. So now we will get into pendulum divination. It's kind of one of the more simpler forms of divination. Pendulum divination, also known as Reditia, dowsing, Rabonacy, or water witching, is a divination by using human sensitivity to the subtle energies emitted by any source of living or inertia. Some folks believe that spirit guides act as a source of energy in revealing secret information. The history of this pendulum divination can be traced back over 5,000 years to the ancient Orient. The pendulum is the main instrument used for this area of divination, although wooden rods are also used. This practice became very popular in the Middle Ages and was favorite practice of divination through the early 19th century. The practice lost favor after that, but then there was a great renewal of interest in the 20th century. In 1933, the British Society of Dowsers was formed. The pendulum is a simple tool. The basic design is a weight of some sort suspended on a fine chain or a length of chain. A dowser is a person who is sensitive to hidden information and uses it as an indicator, like a pendulum or a rod, to intensify that sensitivity. There are a few different ways to hold the pendulum when working with it. Most dowsers will hold the end of the chain directly between their fingers. Just about any small weight can be used for your pendulum. Some people use a pendulum necklace or ring at the end of the chain of the string. Coins, crystal, roots, or keys can also be used, as long as it's heavy enough to act as a pendulum. Quartz crystal is said to be a very powerful active pendulum. Some commercially produced pendulums are hollow and unscrewed to give access to an inside cavity. You can place in here what is known as a witness. This would be a symbol of what would be sought. For instance, if you're looking for water, you could use a couple of drops of water inside it. The recommended length of a chain string is approximately 20 to 30 centimeters. It has been said that the constant use of a pendulum helps forge a connection to your personal energy, and it does take a bit of practice, as we well enough has shown. Like much like with tea leaf reading, you practice like it with tarot card readings. If you find that proper deck, you connect to it. Now, basically, to make your own pendulum, if you take the crystal and wrap it in the length of the jeweler's wire, when you're done wrapping it, leave a loop at the top. Attach one end of the chain to the loop. You also want to make sure the chain isn't too long, because you'll probably be using it over a table or surface. Also be sure to tuck any pokey surfaces of wire so you don't jab yourself later. One good way...
Important.
Yeah, that's very important. Yeah.
Safety first.
Safety first. And then, to charge your pendulum, place it overnight in water or salt. Remember that some crystals will degrade in salt, so be sure to check it when you do this. Another option is leave the pendulum outside overnight in the moonlight. I did that most recently with my pendulum. I had it in our little holder when we had a nice full moon out here just a few weeks ago.
Like all divination tools, though, I mean, there's proper ways to consecrate your tool to make sure in between readings before you even use it. So, I mean, we went over that in our first job, or our first divination talk too. Just make sure that you're doing it properly.
Of course. Now, to calibrate your pendulum simply means you're checking to see it's working. To do this, hold it by the free end of the chain so that the weighted end is loose. Make sure you keep it perfectly still and ask a simple yes or no question, which you already know the answer is yes, like, am I female or do I live in North Dakota?
You're not female, though, so you probably wouldn't want to use that one.
Well, just most likely would go to no then.
Okay.
Before we go to no.
Never know.
You never know.
Somebody's telling you something there.
Yeah.
You never know. Divine intervention might just go, I'm going to mess with you today.
Well, keep an eye on your pendulum, and when it starts moving, note whether it goes side to side, forwards or backwards, or some other direction. This indicates your yes or no direction. Now repeat the process, asking a question to which you know the answer is no. This will give you the no direction. This is a good idea to a few times with different questions so that you get a feel of how your pendulum responds to you. Much like with tea leaf reading, how you'll read it. Mm-hmm. Some will swing horizontally, vertically, others will swing in small, large circles, others don't do a whole lot unless the answer is really important. Once you calibrate your pendulum and gotten to know it a bit, you can use it for basic divination. Now, here's some other major interesting things about divination. Choose a time to work with your pendulum when you know when you will not be disturbed. Sit comfortably and take a few deep breaths to clear your mind and relax. Focus your mind on your intent. Define your purpose and establish the questions you would like to ask. It sometimes helps to write out the questions or keywords beforehand. I've done that sometimes with the important questions where I'll take a piece of paper, write out the circle, and then the yes and no, the boundary of this is yes, the boundary is no, and then ask my question, just to make sure. Once you're focused, hold the pendulum between your thumb and first finger. Some prefer the pendulum rest between the first and middle fingers, but it's also been found that the thumb and the first finger work best. Greet the spirit or whatever power you feel is comfortable working with, and ask for guidance with your divining. As a rule, when dealing with your basic yes or no responses, the pendulum generally will move vertically north to south for yes and horizontally east or west for no. However, there are exceptions to every rule. After a couple sessions, you will learn directions in which pendulum will respond to your questions. After which other forms of divination, your intuition and energies will play a role in establishing the direction of the responses. And it's best to ask the pendulum which direction will respond to each response. Be specific and direct with your questions. Much like any form of divination, you can ask the questions aloud or silently and take an approach in which you feel most comfortable. Sometimes feel silly speaking out loud when say alone, but you may be surprised with the results. I mean, that's also too, because if you really want to mean you don't want a serious answer with it, best to say it out. When you finish asking your questions, thank the spirit of guidance to what you received. Take some notes and answers to what you received. Notes are helpful to look back upon and possibly expand on future sessions. When you have put the pendulum away, go for a walk or find something else to do and focus your mind on some other mundane things in life. Sometimes when we focus too intently on certain aspects of sessions, we lose sight of the obvious. Revisit your notes after your mind has had time to process the information received. I mean, I think we've also noticed that sometimes when we've done a reading, and then sometimes we might go back and like, oh, that's what it could have also meant.
Yep.
And something even as simple as the pendulum has also that effect as well. But here's some other major things to look out for. If you find yourself getting frustrated or lose your focus, go ahead, thank the spirit, and put away the pendulum and come back to it later. Because you might not get that answer right away. Always cleanse your pendulum before and after use. I know that's going to be in a future episode. We're going to talk about proper cleansing. But just like it is like with any other form, make sure to get rid of any negative energies.
Cleanse.
Or anyone else's energies before you introduce it to somebody else.
Exactly.
You don't want any other influences other than those doing the reading.
Depending on the preference, you may want to charge your pendulum on a regular basis if you work it often. So it kind of depends on how often. It's just like with your cell phone, depending on how often you use it, depends on how often you have to charge it. Note any keywords that come to mind when revisiting your notes of the previous session. Jot the words down for future reference. Do not attempt any kind of divination under the influence of an intoxicating substance. You must have a clear, focused mind in order to get the answers you seek. Yeah, we've been all noticing that, the fact that we might accidentally kind of have the fun drinks, but like any sort of divination, that might fog the mind.
Jurriganse can start doing readings. Not a good choice.
Never a good idea.
We're making some pretty interesting answers. That might be fun in that way then.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should try that just to see what happens.
Well, at our for CoreCon, we're going to be having the Gypsy Room, and towards the end of the night, it's going to be intoxicated Gypsy readings, and we're going to warn everyone. Well,
reading
don't
at
take
your own
us
risk.
for our word. This is just for fun. Mm-hmm. But back to Pendulum, I wanted to bring up a couple things there from other Pendulum readers that I've talked to, through my own experience too. I've learned that. Before you even ask the pendulum a question, it's a good idea to ask it permission to ask questions about a specific area. And right there is a great answer too, because if you don't need to know this, or it's not the time, or the universe doesn't want to share this, it'll say no. It'll say no, you can't answer these questions. I've only ever come across that twice in my own pendulum reading though.
But yeah, that's some interesting little insight about the pendulum then. So we'll just wrap it up here, and hopefully this will give you some more insight. We'll stay tuned as we'll have a third part of the more of the common forms of divination. So this is... Oh.
I just have one thing to add about, cleansing your pendulum. The best way to do it is get a little bit of sea salt and water if it's a non-corrosive pendulum, which most of them are, and let it sit in there for a 24-hour period, and that should help cleanse your pendulum. That was told to me by a gypsy woman that Heather and I know very well and miss. She said sea salt and water and set it out in the sun and let it go for a full 24 hours to cleanse that tool, and she said you shouldn't have any issues with it. So just a quick note for you guys to take down
and getting to know your pendulum as well. Another good way to do that is carrying it on your person. I know some people, they sleep with it under their pillow and whatnot and stuff like that.
I never thought of that.
I personally take my pendulum, I keep it in a little muslin bag, and I put it in my bra. I know men don't have that option, but it is a great way to really get to know your pendulum. Like, I know the energy of my pendulum now. I mean, we are tight. Because I carried my pendulum around literally for 3 months in my bra. And that's how I got to know my pendulum. And I found that to be very, very helpful in learning to use my pendulum better and understanding our energy. Because, like, when I first got my pendulum, if I had a swear word in my question, it wouldn't give me an answer. But now I can put swear words into my questions, and it'll answer. Mind you, it was just a test to see what we would get, because I was just learning. But now my pendulum knows me, and it understands swear words now, so...
Okay.
I was just playing around, but hey, now me and my pendulum know each other, and yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
That's a good example of how to connect with your pendulum there.
Exactly.
Let me take and look at my pendulum.
It has to learn your language, and once it gets cozy in your boobs, so... Who would want to get cozy in your boobs?
Well, if you want any further information, a really good book is the Practical Pendulum book by Jurriganse. And that has the information. It also has some major ways of, I saw some nice diagrams of how, like, you can put, like, with the yes or no or different choices.
The different layouts.
Different layouts.
Wonderful. I have a couple layout boards, too. They work wonderful. They help broaden the answers to more than just yes and no. It's very helpful.
But yeah, that's a very good book. We'll have that in the description as well. So we'll wrap this up here. This has been Thomas LionLord Punton.
And Erin Lecy.
AzureStar.
And Heather.
And we wish you merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.